Hey, Brad Hodge here from Bendigo. I have been given the task by Andrew of having a look through and I guess creating a bit of a strategy for writing the 1500 word critical appraisal. And all right, so my basic philosophy, the way in which I think is best to approach essays like this is really to think about what's the most efficient and effective way of doing it. Okay, there is no point spending 80 hours creating something that doesn't get a good grade, right? And we want you to learn a bunch of skills. And so I want to give you a bit of a strategy as to how to approach this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm just going to walk you through the process that I would go through if I was writing this assessment task. So let's share the screen. Okay, we don't want to look at me anymore. So now what we're doing, if we have a look, now always comes back to the rubric. Everything is driven by the rubric. Now, the first thing, you'll see that I've gone through and highlighted the important components that I need to address. Now, what I would recommend is that when you're writing your assessment task or before you're writing your assessment task is to do exactly the same thing. I know that I've done it. Don't just copy this. Go through and go, okay, what do I need to include? Because this is the way that you do really well. And also, from our perspective, by paying attention to what we're looking for, you're actually learning the skills that we want you to learn. So don't gloss over these things. These are the instructions on how to do well. You're all capable of doing really well. So you'll see here, using the feedback. It might come as a shock to you, but some of us are aware, as academics, that some of you sometimes don't read the feedback. You're mad. This is how you develop your skills. This is what you're here for, is to develop these skills. So we want you to use the feedback provided by the marker for your first 500 word piece. Okay. If the marker has said, please fix this, please fix it. You know, if they've made suggestions about how to do something, you don't understand how to do that, have a chat to your tutor or have a chat to your colleagues about how you might develop those skills. Do not ignore the feedback. Make sure you read it, open it up, really think about how you're going to deal with those things. So you're going to take your 500 word piece of amazingness and you're going to develop it to be even stronger. Okay, now you know already, because we've been through this with the 500 word, that this is going to include the aims and hypothesis of the study. Make sure that it's clearly articulated, that you understand what those aims and hypotheses are. The sample and recruitment method. Who did they include? How did they get them? Make sure it's really, really clear. The main findings. Now you'll see here, plural findings, generally that each paper will find more than one thing, and considerations of the findings in light of the aims and hypothesis. So if our hypothesis says we're going to find that, I don't know, all birds fly south for winter, and we do a study and it turns out that half of them fly north, we want to hear about it in relation to the hypothesis. So if the hypothesis is not supported, we want you to talk about it in the light of. Okay, so what does this tell us? How does it answer the question of the hypothesis? That's really, really important. Now, you are building on, so you're going to use your 500 word summary. This is kind of like, you know, money for free, where you get to submit your same assessment task, but you're going to develop it and improve it for this assessment task. Now, the reason this is really important for you, for your learning, is because by applying the things that we've told you to develop in your next assessment task, you're actually developing those skills, which is really important. So the second bit, so provide a summary of the measurement in the study. Okay, now you've already started to do this, and you're going to report on the appropriateness of the measurement. So does this measurement actually do the job? Now, and you're going to consider relevant aspects of validity and reliability. So have a look at those measurement tools. How have they measured this? Okay, so if they've measured, again, shouldn't make up things off the top of my head, but if they've measured health and they've only measured heart rate after exercise, then maybe there's actually a better way. So think about, what do you understand about what they're trying to measure? How have they measured it? Is it an accurate measure? And think in terms of those validity and reliability issues. That's really, really important. Now, if you have a look here, excellent. The summary of the measurement in the study and reporting of the appropriateness of the measurement, considering relevant aspects of validity and reliability, is excellent. So we want to see some evidence that you've engaged with this idea of validity and reliability. If you're freaking out right now because you don't understand validity and reliability, get back into it. Go and have another look. Identify what those validity issues are, reliability issues are, you know, so what those big ideas are, and then have a look at your study and say, does anything match this particular study? Does anything not work here? Okay, and make sure you address that. Now, this is a big one. And the reason it's a big one, see, it's worth quite a bit, is because it's really important that you understand how to think about the literature, how to critique it. Now, when we're talking about critiquing it, we're not just saying identify the gaps, we're also saying identify the strengths. You can't identify the gaps in a piece of literature unless you can understand the strengths. So what we're asking for is a minimum of 4 strengths and weaknesses, and/or weaknesses, okay? So minimum of 4 in total. More if you can, but obviously more is not always better. We want you to approach them, you know, deeply. We want you to really kind of sink your teeth into them and show that you understand them. For 4 strengths and/or weaknesses in both the internal and external validity of the study. Now, if you have a look at that, you've got 4, you've got 2 different types here, internal and external. You know, there's no obligation, but personally, I'd be going, all right, let's find 2 internal strengths and weaknesses, maybe one of each. 2 external strengths and weaknesses, maybe one of each. Start with that. And if you can't find a strength or weakness in either of those categories, then maybe switch to another one. But make sure that you've got both internal and external, because the markers are looking for that. Okay, so describe how all of those strengths or weaknesses of the design might impact the interpretation of the result. Okay, so it might be the case, I know the first thing that students go to is participant numbers. Now be wary of that, because the reality is that you probably haven't done the stats required to understand the participant numbers that you need. So be wary of saying we need more participant numbers. Sometimes we see studies that have 450 participants and students will say, oh, participant numbers aren't enough. And as someone who can do the stats, I'm like, to be honest, 400 is plenty. So just be a bit wary of that. But what you want to do, so validity and reliability is about how strong is this research, is you want to explain how it might impact the interpretation of the results. Okay, so you've got an issue. Every study has strengths and weaknesses. Every study has weaknesses. How is that going to impact the interpretation? Is this something that we should interpret only for a certain cohort? Is it something that needs to be further studied? Does the strength of this paper mean that we can actually be fairly comfortable that, you know, this idea is true? So make sure you talk about the impact of interpretation. Now, paraphrasing, we've talked about this before, but when you're talking about other research, we want you to use your own language. Now, when I say that, I still mean professional, but what you want to be doing is making sure that you understand the ideas before you try and paraphrase them. If you're struggling to paraphrase, it's probably because you don't quite understand it yet. And you might want to go back and have another look at it. If you still don't understand it, go and grab a colleague or a friend and talk to them through it and see if you can get your head around it. Once you understand it, you'll be able to paraphrase it. Now, I talked about some hints as to how to paraphrase last time, so you might want to have a look at that video again if you've forgotten. Don't use direct quotes. Direct quote rings the alarm bell for me. This person doesn't understand what they've read, okay? So make sure that you paraphrase really well. Now, finally, 10% sentence structure. Again, read it out aloud to get your sentence structure, grammar and punctuation and spelling. Really good hint, if your grammar and punctuation is horrible, look up a rule every now and again, okay? My nemesis is colons and semicolons. Every now and again, I make a point of going, oh, I can't remember how to use them again, and I'll jump online and have a look. Look it up. You've got Google. Look up how to use that particular rule. Over the period of your degree, you're going to be here for 3 or 4 years. You will actually develop the skills, the grammar and punctuation skills that perhaps you don't have now. When I started my degree many years ago, my grammar and punctuation skills were absolutely atrocious, but I managed to develop them over time. But only if you do it on purpose. It doesn't happen accidentally. Use of either APA 6 or 7. Whichever guide you've got access to, make sure that you use that referencing guide and just do it really slowly. The key to APA referencing is just to be really, really slow. Do not leave it to the last minute, because then it's a horrible job. Each time a reference comes up, look up the guide, go, how do I reference this? Carefully go through. Have I got the dots in the right places, the commas in the right places? This will become second nature for you. Okay, you won't have to think about this all the time. It will actually become second nature. The way it becomes second nature is by you doing it really slowly at the beginning, and then later on you won't even have to think about it, okay? And the stress will just be gone from APA. So make sure that you do it slowly and get your head around it. So if you go through all of those things and make sure that you've got them all in your essay, obviously the last thing you're going to have to do is probably cut your word count down. Make sure it's within that 1,500 words. Check yourself against these criteria. You're going to do really well. Okay, the people who struggle with essays like this are the people who leave it to the last minute. You really want to make sure that you get this done early, get all the ideas in, make them flow, read it out aloud, really think about, are my ideas coming through, are they clear, and then edit. You know, I would never give anything of mine to a publisher before getting colleagues to read it. And I would never give it to colleagues to read before I'd read it out aloud 10, maybe 20 times. Okay, and I've been doing this for a while. So the skills that we hope you to develop are really, you know, really strengthening your ability to critique and think about research, because this helps us in our decision making as health practitioners and in various professions, being able to pay attention to the literature and analyze its strengths and weaknesses and see what we can pay attention to and what we can respond to. So I hope this has been useful. If you've got any questions, please bring them to your tutor. That might be me in Bendigo, but bring them to your tutor and they will be able to answer them in class. Looking forward to reading these and to seeing your skills develop. Thanks.